Although I know the old familiar halls of this house in daylight intimately, at night they shift. It seems to me as though the poison in these walls seeps out across the floorboards, moulders in the darkest corners, to pool in shadows of the dim gas lamps. And, of course, I know better than to be trapped in the flickering lamplight. Yet I find myself pausing as I pass a commonplace mirror. Like a gullible child, I am locked in the tricks of the light, twisting the shadows on my pale, glowing face in the oppressive hall. A modestly sized mirror, contrastingly set into a garishly ornate frame, twice the standard size and intricacy for such a mundane object. I appraise my features, beginning with the tight seam of my mouth. I press the fatty slivers together firmly, squeezing away the rosy blood, then releasing, a flush returning into their fleshy confines. Continuing north, I observe my nose, jutting from my face in a manner I once thought handsome, but now I cannot shake the likeness in my mind of that of a thick and gnarled tree root, the two sprouting branches of which, forming my eyebrows, cast shade down over my deep-set eyes. The breath catches in my throat. The swell of my Adam's apple dips erratically in my reflection. The irises to my muddy retinas swipe side to side as I note how they appear too far inset, too deeply shadowed, and slowly my eyelids peel back little by little, past the point of acceptable and into the realm of uncanny. These are not my eyes, but the eyes of my dear cousin. I had watched as my uncles hauled her away, tendrils of her dark hair flying about her wet face down from their carefully pinned curls. The sound of her bare feet slapping against the flagstones of the entrance hall ricocheted from every wall. Slick and oily fluids of birth still dripped down her thighs, and blood splotched across her nightgown, her womb barely empty of her new babe. Still a young boy, I told myself I didn't understand, and followed the parade of bodies up the stairs and across the landing silently, some primitive instinct causing fat tears to streak my cheeks. She made so much noise, but I can't remember what she said. I'm not sure I understood the time either. Her father, my uncle, spoke soothingly to her, his eyes weeping, but his grip firm. I remember backing away as I recognized the door which we had headed towards. But my small, quivering shoulders were braced by the leaden hands of my father. He wanted me to watch, to see what we were made to do. Dear cousin had fallen silent by then, limp as a doll in the arms of her father as she was coerced into the nursery. As the door swung to a close, she locked her eyes with mine, and a strangled whine escaped her gaping lips. I never saw dear cousin again. My father had told me, "The house is hungry, son. I know you're frightened, but this is a burden our family must bear." I understood then, at that moment, the answer to questions I'd never thought to ask. It starves every moment of every day. It waits patiently, and when a child is born, it demands a sacrifice, else it take away that which has only just drawn breath. Growing up, I had been haunted by the vacant spaces where I thought a mother should be, but I grew up in a family where mothers were few and far between, and thus let the worry be. Since that night, I swore I would get out as soon as I was old enough, and never return. But life is funny like that. Release a hound from its cage, and it runs far away towards its newfound freedom. But sooner or later, the creature realizes it doesn't know how to live without the safety of the cage. It has a choice to come back or starve. We were starving. A chime of a clock somewhere, nestled deep within the house, takes me from the cold place where my mind was pouring. My eyes are my eyes alone. I turn and stride away from the things in the mirror. The soothing thuds of my footsteps hush my soiled mind. Although we have only spent one full season under this roof, the moment we stepped over the threshold, Caroline began to grow fat with our child. And every moment since I have clawed through my mind for our escape. There is only one option I can think of, and it robs me of what little sleep I still retain. As we both ready for bed, I explain my plans in full to my partner. She is patient, but I can read the unhappiness in the hunch of her shoulders and the tightness of her eyes. Not for long, my dove, for not nearly as long as you'd think, just until you are well and our baby is safe. We'll come back home and it'll be as though not a second has passed. She is still, and she is silent. Yours and our child's safety is the most important thing to me. I want you to understand that. You do understand, Caroline. She takes hold of my hand. We don't have to leave, she snaps, her porcelain pale thumb burrowing into the palm of my hand from where it rests on top of the covers. The nursery is just a ghost story. What happened to your cousin was barbaric, but by the hands of her father and not any curse. The knuckles under her silken skin blossom white from the subtle shaking strain of her hand, clawing into my own. I pry her fingers out of my flesh with my free hand. Red and weeping crescent wounds adorn the back of my hand, and a single deep gouge in my palm from her offending thumb. Her voice changes from her regular sonorous chirps and sighs, dissolving into a hollow, guttural moaning. Sometimes I want to just shake you, rattle you loose of all those ghosts that you allow to fester, of all the shadows and of all the cold and of all the rot behind your eyes. Bile bites the back of my throat, and I open my mouth to speak. But before the words can fully form, her free hand clasps my upper arm. A whisper stretched long and thin escapes her parted lips. I look at her now for the first time in a long time. With eyes bright as new pennies and lips as bowed as a willow, she is ethereal in the nearly light. Her hair drips in fat locks down her shoulders, disappearing beyond the cotton that covers them to flow down her back. The swell of her engorged stomach drags acid up to scorch my insides. I swallow back slippery panic. Rasping, I clear my throat and rumble firmly. To sleep now, love. To sleep. It no longer comes as a surprise to me that I often find myself in the final twilight hours of the day, scrutinizing the wallpaper of the nursery. Never do I recall the journey to the room, nor the compulsion that drove me to do so. I simply feel as though I blinked a second too long, lingered behind the enveloping darkness of my eyelids, and re-emerged into the world, always in the nursery. Tonight, I quench the candle flame beside her bed, and I settle. I stare unblinkingly for as long as I can into the inky sea above me, until the sea seems to shift and morph in the way the night would when I was a child. A parade of shapes dance to an unperceivable drum. A menagerie of twilight creatures arrive to the surface, so close I could reach out and grasp one. Then swiftly they descend back to the nothing from which they were born. A pattern begins to emerge, one which I can't follow when I focus on it, but appears in the corners of my vision. It seems to me as a great, messy string of fleshy things, of veins and sinews and other gore. The creature pulsates and writhes in synchronization with my pounding heartbeat, and a bead of sweat worms its way into my wavering eyes, forcing me to blink. And yet, somehow, I'm surprised to perceive the pale moonlight slicing through the barred windows to reveal the mouldering nursery wallpaper. Glowing in the evening dim, the pattern appearing as the mottled and pus-ridden skin of a leper. Then I see them. Those eyes which aren't mine peers through the wallpaper. A wide, stretched mouth gapes within the nooks and crannies. All at once the wall surged towards me, and I am pinned, crushed beneath the plastered ceiling and suffocated by countless arms of rotting wallpaper. The arms and hands caress, claw, squeeze and tear at my body. With each touch, a building cacophony of sounds flood my ears. Frantically, I claw at my head, the sensation akin to wild birds cawing and clawing from within, as desperate as I am for freedom. My fingers are bloodied from clots of scraped up gore, the clear and unwavering screech of a baby's cry ringing throughout every nerve in my body. Please, I cry. I snatch and tear at the wallpaper enveloping me. My vision is blinded by shades of yellow, red and black. My fingers fly to my eyes, and I dig my fingers into the wet and weeping sockets. In the following seconds, minutes, hours, or days, I wrestle with every muscle in my being to escape my torture. It seems that every time my fingers find purchase under a layer of wallpaper and tear it away, it becomes less and less clear to me where the wallpaper ends, and I begin. At some point, I begin to register dull sparks, blossoms of throbbing cold in areas of my face, arms, and head. Finally, a glimmer of light trickles into my vision. I kick and crawl with the last of my strength toward hope, and finally the walls retreat. I manage to claw back from the walls as much as myself as I can distinguish and collapse to my knees. There is a steady stream of hot liquid streaming from my right eye, dribbling down my chin and dripping in heavy drops onto the rough, splintered floorboards. In an instant, I feel as though I have woken from a dream in which I was lost so irreversibly, yet, as with all dreams, I have awoken at last. I am kneeling in the centre of the nursery. The air is thick with dust and the repulsive stench of rot. The light shines stronger, and I see it is a lantern held just beyond the entrance to the nursery. I am barely within myself, feeling as though I float several feet above and adjacent to my crumpled form. Caroline's pale and pinched face appears before me, the lantern casting a sickening yellow tinge to strangle her soft features. The sockets of her eyes are deep and cast further into shadow by the light. An unnatural shimmer reflects the steadily flickering lantern light. I want to reach to her, to hold her and her unborn child close and tell them all is okay now, for father is here. But in that moment, shaking with uncontrollable fear and disgust, a trembling scream explodes from my wife, who now wears dear cousin's face. The sound is unbearable. It cuts through every nerve in my skull. The image of her face stabs my eyes like pins pressed slow and hard into the retina, and all I want is for the pain to stop. She is still making that terrible sound when a puddle forms around our feet, and our hands fly to clasp at her swollen stomach. But I cannot bring myself to focus now. It appears as though every thought in my mind has been split down the centre and divided irreparably. A single phrase ricochets inside my mind. The house is hungry, and it must be fed.